Health is wealth. Health is wealth. This is Tamon Brown, and I trust that everybody's doing well. Today, I wanted to do a bit of an educational broadcast that's going to highlight the importance of strengthening our gut health, and not just strengthening it, but preserving it, and pretty much doing what we got to do in order to keep ourselves safe from this right here, glyphosate. And you're looking at a website right now. It's one of our educational third-party gut health websites, educational websites that some of our team leaders have put together for us to be able to share this information with the public. And if you look in the caption, you're going to see that Xiome.now.site, that link is actually in the caption in case you want to save it and, share it with someone else, or share this video with someone else, because this information, if you've never been exposed to it, it's going to highlight a lot of things that you may not be aware of right now. And it's going to stress the importance of natural and organic prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes, being taken every day, because our gut health makes up 70 to 80% of our immune system. So keeping it within good time, I'm going to share this. We'll start this rather. And this first video is about a little under 3 minutes. So let's see what EWG has to say about glyphosate.
So what's the deal with all this news about glyphosate? I mean, it's just a weed killer, right? How bad can it be? Here's EWG's quick rundown of what glyphosate is, why people are so concerned about it, and what the future holds. Glyphosate is the key ingredient in Monsanto's Roundup, the most widely used pesticide in the US. Each year, more than 250 million pounds of glyphosate are sprayed on American crops, primarily on Roundup-ready corn and soybeans genetically engineered to withstand the toxic herbicide. But it's also sprayed in our communities, in parks, golf courses, and even playgrounds. Fun fact, you can also find glyphosate in your cereal bowl. EWG tests of Cheerios and other oat-based cereals found shockingly high levels of glyphosate in almost every sample tested. Nearly every time a government agency or public interest group tests food for glyphosate, they find it. So why are people so concerned? In one word, cancer. In 2015, the World Health Organization designated glyphosate a probable carcinogen. The state of California followed, adding it to its Proposition 65 list of chemicals known to cause cancer, and scientific studies continue to confirm this link. We should flag here that the United States Environmental Protection Agency does not agree, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Monsanto dismisses these health concerns. They've repeatedly claimed that glyphosate is safe and tried to cover up any evidence to the contrary, and the EPA has let them get away with it. Monsanto is now battling tens of thousands of lawsuits because of glyphosate's link to cancer. Internal documents exposed in these lawsuits show a troubling history. Monsanto first learned of the link to cancer in 1983 and has been manipulating the EPA to hide the truth. They also include emails that show the company was in close communication with the EPA official overseeing the safety review of glyphosate, as well as efforts to stall a federal review of the herbicide's toxicity to people. In addition, the EPA ignored independent scientific research linking glyphosate to cancer. Instead, they used research provided by and paid for by Monsanto. So where is this all going? We're not entirely sure. Juries have held glyphosate responsible for plaintiffs' cancer in 3 lawsuits already, awarding the plaintiffs over $2 billion in damages for the company to pay. We expect more of these verdicts as the lawsuits continue to go to trial. And the EPA? Well, the EPA has doubled down on their support for glyphosate. In April 2019, the EPA announced that it believed glyphosate to be safe. Needless to say, at EWG, we don't agree. We stand by the scientific evidence linking glyphosate to cancer, and we're going to continue to raise awareness. But we need your help. Go to ewg.org/glyphosate to take action and spread the word to your friends and family on social media.
Okay, so if you're anything like me, and I'm trusting that that was just as alarming to you as it was to me, and many others who came in contact with this information, wherein it was made aware to our senses, right? And the reason why I'm pointing this out is that I've been plant based for over 10 years, but even still, and what you're gonna see now is that even on a plant based diet, even if it says organic, right, this glyphosate has become a permanent part of our ecosystem. And you see right here, this is another third party video that you'll find on the Xiome.now.site link that's in the caption. Chemical farming is ensuring that regardless of whatever our diet is or however which way we eat, whatever our intake, we're just simply not getting enough vitamins and minerals and nutrients through our food, through our produce. And this is going to answer the question of why. Just why do we need, immunological, immunotherapeutical, and sustainable supplements to fill in the gaps? So here's the next video.
We've literally built an entire economy of not just the United States, but the entire Western civilization on healthcare. And that's been a hidden reality for a long time. Mm-hmm. But for thousands of years, the real control of populations has been around their food. And we find ourselves in that same, if not amped up version now that we have 7 billion souls on the planet. That becomes very, very big business when you start to be able to control food. And we see that the ultimate political control is around the food chain and whether it delivers health or not. I've basically found myself in a massively reductionist state of my understanding of the world around us when I had really spent, 20 years of my life studying medicine, which was the opposite, where every year and minute you study in that environment, they try to convince you it's more and more complicated, that there's 1,000 different diseases, that there's 10,000 different drugs to treat those diseases. But in reality, what started to deconstruct that world was the realization that the cancer I was studying under the microscope when I was devising chemotherapy happened to be really the exact same process as an ulcer in the ankle of a diabetic patient. Again, sound totally disparate, but in the end, totally reductionist viewpoint is it's only one thing, which is chronic inflammation. Inflammation is actually a normal biologic response to an injury. If we have a chronic inflammatory epidemic in the world, which is a better definition than lots of diseases, then we must be overwhelming the immune system of all of the public for some reason at the same time. Sometime between 1982 and 2000, we did something to the environment to totally decimate the protection system of our immune systems. And the big tip-off to me in this process, here I am in the labs developing chemotherapy and is so buried down the rabbit hole of the pharmaceutical model. But there was a big tip-off starting to happen in the late 1990s and early 2000s that we were seeing diseases in what seemed like completely different organ systems in the population go epidemic simultaneously. Examples of this was certainly autism that you mentioned earlier. We had 1 in 5,000 children with autism in 1975. Today we have, just 3 weeks ago, released the most recent data, 1 in 36 children with an autism spectrum disorder. And the big argument for a long time was, well, maybe we're just diagnosing and recognizing autism better, which is kind of laughable if you've ever sat with an autistic child. Here's a 5-year-old who can't speak, can't make eye contact, hits his head on the wall for a few hours a day to try to console his terror. We didn't miss that in 1975. This is not a diagnostic dilemma. But then to further emphasize that, the fastest acceleration in that growth pattern of this epidemic has happened between 2012 and today, where we're seeing a doubling time every 2 to 3 years in that autism rate. At the current rate, we'll see 1 in 3 children with autism in 2035. And then in 1996, we saw this sudden rise in the Alzheimer's dementia in women. Interestingly, the Alzheimer's rates has not changed in males since that time. But at the same time, 1996, we see this uptick and consistent linear growth parallel to that Alzheimer's track in women with Parkinson's in males. And so we have, species-specific, gender-specific, organ-specific diseases in the brain and peripheral cancers, all of which took off at the same time in the mid-1990s. Autoimmune disease, unbelievable epidemic starting in the late 1990s. And so this was like the cracks that were starting to form in my worldview, that maybe there weren't 1,000 different diseases because they all started going epidemic at once, which really begged the question, is there a root cause of the root cause of the root cause of all disease? In the same way that we've misunderstood the gut and what gut health means, we misunderstood soil for the longest time. And in the early 1900s, really the late 1880s, we started to change the way we farmed. Simple things happened, like we went to steel grinding for wheat instead of stone grinding it, which meant we could get more of the fiber out of it, which we created a higher gluten and a higher refined carbohydrate load in our flours and in our wheat system and everything else. So that's one example of a shift. But the main thing that happened is we started to disrespect the importance of crop rotation and soil rest, cover cropping, etc. This led to a massive death of the topsoil, which led to the Dust Bowl that ran through the 1920s and 30s. And it's fascinating that here we are only 80 years out from this event where our ancestors, 2 generations, 3 generations, were literally starving to death. We had soup lines that went for days, across the entire Midwest, and houses were literally being buried in dust of dead soil that had died. During the Dust Bowl, we actually, for the first time, started to outsource our food production because these people lost their local gardens and farms. So we started to rely on importing food for the first time, and we started to outsource that concept. Then World War II hit, and we did something interesting, which is we had this huge petroleum industry that was revved up bigger than it had ever been in the history, because we had all tanks, jeeps, mechanized warfare for the first time in human history on this scale. We had planes for the first time. I mean, this was like full out, totally different thing that had ever happened in history, and it was a world war, much different than World War I in its scope. And so we see this huge petroleum industry that suddenly grinds to a halt because the war is over. So we have this glut of petroleum, and we suddenly realize we can extract nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium out of that oil. And we started making chemical-based fertilizers for the first time. So they found a new marketplace for this oil. And it was a great message to the farmers who were still suffering with bad dirt in the Midwest, is like, you don't need to do crop rotation, you don't need to compost, you don't need to go back to thousands of years of farming tradition, just spray this chemical on there.
Yeah, forget about whatever you might have learned during the Dust Bowl.
Yeah. Now, that was 40 years ago. That's all ancient times. We're modern now. And so these farmers started using it, and it became a revolution for them, and it was actually called the Green Revolution of the 1960s. And so the Green Revolution was actually use of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, or NPK fertilizers. And the NPK fertilizer did turn plants green because nitrogen and phosphorus do that. But what was lacking in those plants for the first time in history was the nutrients and the medicine that should always have been in that food. And so the plants became weak. Just like a human being who lacks nutrients, their immune system goes down. And when a plant's immune system goes down, it becomes prone to viruses, pests, and it can't excrete the stuff from the root system that would keep weeds at bay. And so now the plants are getting, attacked from the outside, if you will, and the chemical industry says, no problem, here's a new chemical weed killer, here's a pesticide. And so the farmers got themselves locked into this codependent relationship with chemical fertilizers, then chemical drugs for the plants to keep them alive despite a failing biology underneath the surface there.
Right, akin to taking a drug to deal with the symptoms of some ailments that you have that creates a whole battery of side effects that then require you to take another drug to deal with those. It's just an environmental version of that.
It's exactly the same thing. And in fact, the drugs have been the same in a lot of ways. The main drug is antibiotics. Western medicine really got its first foothold with penicillin, our first antibiotic, and that happened to be in the 1940s with World War II. And so we developed in the same decade the antibiotics that would kill the bacteria in our body with the antibiotics that would kill the soil. And I say antibiotic because these chemicals that we were using as pesticides are largely antibiotic rather than what you would think of maybe a weed killer or something. And the most famous of these, of course, has become Roundup, the most single successful chemical warfare that's ever been sold on the planet. We currently sell and use 4.5 billion pounds of glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in the chemical, to treat the soils of the earth. 4.5 billion pounds of a single chemical annually. That chemical was never patented as a weed killer. It's only been patented as an antibiotic, and then it was repatented as an anti-parasite, antifungal.
Yeah, that was the original purpose of it, correct?
Well, it's the mechanism. It's the mechanism they recognized, and so the mechanism of glyphosate is to go in and block enzymes in soil bacteria, fungi, and plants. And that enzyme pathway is called the Xiome pathway, and it's important because it makes a number of the essential amino acids. Our bodies are composed of over 200,000 proteins, but we only have 20,000 genes. We have this pathetically dumb genome in the sense that a flea has 30,000 genes. So you're two-thirds as complicated as a flea at the gene level, which I find reassuring. If I can't find my keys or I'm having a bad day, I'm like, hey, I'm two-thirds as complicated as a flea. What are my real expectations here? But the reality is we're very simple at the genetic level, and yet we make over 200,000 proteins from a bunch of amino acids. There's 26 amino acids that will build those 200,000 proteins. Those 26 amino acids are just like the 26 letters of the English alphabet, in the sense that the vast majority of those are useful, but not critical. But the vowels, these 8 vowels in our language, if you subtract one of those vowels, you can affect hundreds of thousands of words. The vowels in the amino acid vocabulary here are the essential amino acids, which if you start to tweak any of those 9, you're going to start to lose tens of thousands of protein structures in their functionality and in their unique form. And so those essential amino acids, not only are they important like the vowels, they also can't be made by the human body. So those 9 have to come from your food chain somewhere. And it turns out that they are only made by the bacteria, the fungi, and the plants. You don't have a Xiome pathway in your human cells. And so these essential amino acids are blocked through the Xiome pathway by Roundup. And so imagine treating a food chain with a chemical that blocks the ability of these plants to make the building blocks for a healthy human body. Mm-hmm. Forget about a human, it's a dog, a cat, any mammal, any complex multicellular biology is going to depend on these essential amino acids. And we literally, in the last 15 years, subtracted out the ability to build the body because we changed the 26 letters. And so the current statistics is that less than 0.1% of the Roundup used on the planet actually hits a weed. The other 99.99% gets into the soil and into the water system and washes off. And so we are now seeing the runoff from these farms and in the water table itself. So we have fossil aquifers of the United States here that run from Canada all the way down to historically Mexico that is now dried up. We've turned over 1,000 square miles of Texas into desert over just the last 20 years from sucking water out of the ground. Mm-hmm. That fossil aquifer is now contaminated with Roundup that's filtered down into this ancient freshwater source for us. And then in the same moment, you've got the Mississippi River, which collects over 80% of all of the Roundup in the country, and then it's evaporating the whole time, so it's going into the air that you breathe, and then it goes into the clouds, and then it rains down on us. Recent studies in the air and rainfall in the southern United States is showing 75% of the rain, 75% of the air contaminated with Roundup. So before you even take a bite of food, you're being hit with an antibiotic when you breathe. You're getting hit with an antibiotic when you experience rainfall. And so you may be growing organic crops, but they're getting rained on. And so we have now locked this water-soluble toxin into our environment. Fortunately, to give you a little bit of breather here from the bad news, is that there are bacteria and fungi that can eventually digest the glyphosate. The downside is we need to stop spraying it so that they can return. Mm-hmm. We're decimating those very bacteria and fungi by the presence of Roundup to the point where they're not digesting it. Current estimates is if we stop spraying Roundup tomorrow, it would take about 50 years before our ecosystem saw a drop in the level of Roundup below our toxic level. If the conspiracy theorist was right, then we'd see 1 in 2 people with cancer, we'd see 1 in 30 kids with autism, we'd see Parkinson's going crazy. They're literally repeating back, if if it was toxic, we would see literally what we're seeing, you know. And so the reality is the public health statistics have gotten so grim in the last 8 years that nobody can call this a conspiracy theory anymore.
But it's almost like, yeah, but where's the smoking gun?
The smoking gun is what's been missing. Mm-hmm. That's what we found in 2012. So in 2012, we found it backwards. I don't think anybody's actually smart enough with the human gray matter that we're given to actually create a paradigm shift prospectively, right? So every great, mind that we look to in the past, Galileo or, Ben Franklin or anybody, we said, oh, they discovered something, or, Edison. These just came at moments when the evidence got so overwhelming that it became obvious, right? And so in the same way, in 2012, the evidence was getting so overwhelming that we were onto something in the nutrition world. But at the time, I was still thinking cancer therapy, because my background was in chemotherapy development. And so when I found these molecules in soil that looked similar to the chemotherapy I'd been making, a lot of bells started ringing of like, what is that? Where did it come from? How is there medicine in the dirt? Like, where is that coming from? And within a few weeks of that discovery of those molecules, we found out that bacteria and fungi were making these specific shapes of these carbon molecules. And that really closed the loop for me, because there had been some papers coming out in the mid-2000s in the cancer world that were starting to say that the bacteria in your gut were predicting which cancers you would get. If you're missing these bacteria, you would get prostate cancer. If you had these bacteria, you would get breast cancer. That was so radically bizarre and out there for our current model, even to this day, as to how cancer worked. But now you fast forward 8-10 years, and now there's tens of thousands of articles that are showing that genomically, the bacterial genome is way more important in determining cancer than the human genome. And so this reality was hitting. And so in 2012, when we discovered these chemicals that look a little like chemotherapy that are made by bacteria and fungi in the soil, it suddenly closed the loop of, oh my gosh, what if the bacteria in our gut is doing the same thing? What if the bacteria and the fungi are actually our best source of medicine for everything? And so that's the direction we were going. But as soon as we put this into petri dishes with cancer cells and beyond, we suddenly realized, no, there's something way deeper happening with this information stream coming out of bacteria and fungi. And it was my chief science officer, Dr. John Gilday. He's a PhD in genetics and cell biology, and he was the first to realize that we had put our finger on the glyphosate toxicity issue, is that this communication network from the bacteria and fungi was actually supporting the protein structure in our gut lining. And so it turns out that the gut is held together as these trillions of cells that make up that cellophane layer by tight junctions. These are Velcro-like proteins that hold one microscopic cell to the next to create this coherent carpet. And he had recognized before this, and a number of other labs had started to publish, that glyphosate seemed to increase the permeability of this membrane. And nobody was really sure why yet. But we suddenly realized that if this bacterial communication network was in there, we couldn't injure the membrane. It became bulletproof to the glyphosate injury. And so in that journey, we started to really study glyphosate and its relationship to the human cells, because like you said, Monsanto's been swearing up and down that there is no harm to the human body because the Xiome pathway only exists in bacteria and fungi. Well, that may be true regarding that enzyme target, but the classic thing with any drug is it always has off-target effects, right? And so that's why drugs have side effects, is they don't actually go and do exactly what your doctor says it's going to go do. It's going to hit a bunch of other receptors and do other things. The side effects of glyphosate that are outside of the Xiome pathway is direct injury to the protein structure that holds your gut lining together. This would be bad news if that was it, but it turns out that every macromembrane in your body, the blood vessels that fuel your entire body with oxygen and nutrients, are held together with the same tight junctions. The blood-brain barrier that protects your peripheral nervous system and your brain, same tight junctions. The kidney tubules that are held together to detox your body, same tight junctions. And so what's happened as we've introduced a chemical that's directly toxic to this Velcro-like protein is we turn into leaky sieves on the front end, gut leak and nasal sinus leak. And so every time we breathe, every time we eat, we're starting to leak and our immune system gets overwhelmed. And then the blood vessels that are supposed to deliver either an immune response from peripheral or get nutrients to some distant space is also leaking. And so we're getting permeability of the blood vessels. Then you get to the blood-brain barrier. This is supposed to be the holy of holies. A peripheral nerve or the brain is supposed to be protected against everything in your blood, because even glucose, which is the main fuel for your brain, should not get into the brain in an unregulated fashion, it will damage the nerves. And so the holy of holies of the central and peripheral nervous system is being destroyed. And so if that's true, if glyphosate was really damaging that, then we should see a massive explosion in neurologic injury to children and adults starting in about 1996. And that's exactly when we see this steep increase happening in autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, neurodegenerative conditions like MS, autoimmune diseases, and all the rest. I mean, all of this has sounded like a lot of bad news, but identifying a problem is so much of the solution, you know. And so now that we identify the problem, look, we've put into our food chain a chemical that deletes the ability to build a healthy human body. We've put into the food chain a chemical that deletes the medicine out of our food, which we didn't have time to talk about, but that Xiome pathway makes the alkaloids, which are the medicinal features of our food, is deleted by glyphosate. So we can build a diseased body, we build a food chain that doesn't have the medicine in it, and then we take away the most vital thing, which is this microcosm, macrocosm phenomenon you just talked about. So far I've been describing to you that we are losing the identity between the outside world and our immune system by the breakdown of these membranes. We get leak. That's literally taking away self-identity from the immune system, and so we get autoimmune disease where we're starting to react to our own body as if it was foreign. In the same way, at the macro level, I believe we're losing our self-identity as human beings as we start to leak, and we start to become majorly depressed, panic disorder. We start to get lost down these rabbit holes of doubt, insecurity, fear, guilt. We have spiritual crisis. We have relationship crisis that's on an epidemic level equal to cancer and beyond. The ability to stay in human relationships seems to be the most complicated thing that we could possibly endure right now. It's because we are literally losing self-identity at the cell level, because we are eating a chemical that breaks our self-identity at the cell level. A sickness happens, and it results in an immune reaction and a healing process. I think that's what's happening to our society right now. We have a sickness and a disease on the planet of loss of self-identity and human consciousness of our purpose here, only to trigger the ultimate healing process, which is to realize that we're all one. We are all on one mission to find truth in ourselves and through one another. We are calling in community. We are going to overcome the isolation of our cell phone era. We're going to start to touch each other more. We're going to hug each other more because we have to. And that's a beautiful healing process that I already see afoot in the world around me. And I'm blessed to be able to go and speak all over the world right now. And I'm blessed in that journey to see humans changing their macro consciousness as they change their diet, as they change their nutrition, as they get in touch with their food chain, as they put bacterial and fungal communication networks back into their body. They come back 18 months later to my clinic and they'll say, "Doc, I just left my husband. He's been abusing me for 35 years, and I finally realized I don't deserve that, and I left." And so a woman can in an instant suddenly realize, as her boundaries go up at the gut and at the blood-brain barrier, her macro boundaries of that's not spiritually and psychologically appropriate. I am me, I am important, I am loved, I don't need that kind of abuse in my life. In the same way, I'll have somebody walk in and say, "Doc, I just quit my job. I just started my company that I've been wanting to start for 30 years and wasn't confident enough to start, and I just realized I am ready, and I just did it." And so I have this goosebump experience over and over again, despite some of the tragedy that's in the talks that I give and the science that I now know. And I'm constantly seeing this bubbling up of human hope and human healing and consciousness coming on, and I take great hope in that. I take great excitement that if a few of us can become conscious and aware and awake right now, it has a ripple effect that is so quick, and it has to be quick, because one thing we can be certain with, no matter what background we come from scientifically or politically, we can agree that any society faced with 1 in 3 children with autism will collapse under a financial blow that is inescapable. And so we're about 16 years away from a sure, complete collapse of our financial status as a country, and yet we don't hear a single politician talking about it. Because why? Because the politicians are not the solution. You and I are the solution as consumers, and we are doing it already. The organic food movement, nobody predicted how successful it was going to be. 10 years ago, it was less than 1% of the food sold in the country, and now we're pushing it. We're up to maybe 4 or 5% in a lot of communities. If we can push that to 16%, these are numbers that were apparently leaked from Monsanto in their marketing analysis. If the American food chain became 16% organic, Monsanto and chemical farming would lose its financial stability. Thank you for watching this episode of After School. I'm Dr. Zach Bush, and I'm just honored to be with the community. At the fabric of our nature is the message and capacity for regeneration. And fascinatingly, after the last 5 extinction events on the planet, there has been an explosion of life. Because, in fact, the fabric of the genome, the fabric of biology as it is made, is that of adaptation and diversification. After every major extinction event, the level of stress within the genome inspires more creativity. It is not a demise, it is not a victim, it sees the opportunity for something more dynamic, more adaptive, and more resilient, and ultimately more intelligent. After that last great extinction, the world did not suffer back or struggle back to create the dinosaurs. Instead, Mother Nature envisioned the possibility of birds, mammals, humans. And here we walk the earth today. And we have triggered an extinction event through our extraction and our consumption because of our belief that we are separate from nature.
Okay, I think that what has just been detailed really pushes home the question of just where are we actually getting our nutrients from, in regards to what's taking place with this chemical farming and our genes, our genome, our gut health, and our proteins, everything that was just detailed. I don't think it needs to be redressed, but I just want you to ask yourselves this question of just where are you actually getting your real nutrients, and how are you protecting yourselves biologically from this this leakage. And as he said, it's not just in the gut. We're made up of trillions of cells, and all of those cells have to be held together. So I'm gonna move on to the solution that I've been using for practically a year now, Xiome 365. And if you are someone who, after seeing and hearing the information that has just been shared, and you're asking yourself serious questions now about what can you do about, protecting you and your family from this glyphosate, that's just totally eradicating, the I would have to say the health of our cellular structures in our bodies. This right here is going to interest you.
Okay, so let's go through this really quickly, guys. Again, you've heard Daryl say this, you've heard Bodhi say this, I'm going to say this. Again, this is a presentation that is not meant to diagnose and treat, cure, and mitigate diseases and illnesses. Remember, that's not what we do, and especially for tonight with what we're going to be talking about, I don't want you to get the wrong impression here. Please hear me when I say this. Nowhere in Zuma's product line are we producing products that cure diseases. Number one, that would be irresponsible for me to tell you that we're doing that. Number two, it's illegal, quite honestly, for us to do that. We are a dietary supplement company. We are not a doctor. We don't have the ability to prescribe or diagnose and tell you what you should do with your health. Here's what I will say, though. In life, the reason we have disease, the reason we have illness is often not because the body just randomly breaks down. It's usually because we're deficient in some of those key things the body needs to be at peak function, peak efficiency. Or there are influences outside of our body, in our world, that are destroying and harming what would be our good health. Somewhere along the way, it's got to be our decision as human beings to decide what we want to do when it comes to our health. Do we want to just kind of wait for things to happen, or would we rather be more interested in practicing prevention? In my world, in my life, I live by this model that says if I can prevent disease and illness, if I can fortify my body with the things it needs most, then I stand a much better chance of enjoying really good health for a long time. So I want you to be thinking about Zuma in that realm. Now, that being said, before I get into our presentation tonight, is it possible, in fact, is it probable, that if you are lacking certain nutrients, certain things that the body needs for optimal health, if you start to put those back into the body, is it possible or probable or likely that the body can then use those materials to start to repair and restore and heal itself? The answer is absolutely yes, and that's where notice or pay attention to the pharmaceutical drugs that are advertised on television. I can probably assure you that 80%, maybe more, of those advertisements you're seeing on television for specific pharmaceutical drugs are addressing most, if not all, of these conditions you're seeing on the screen right now. Now, in my mind, is if I see one of the largest industries in our world today, the pharmaceutical industry, advertising pharmaceutical solutions for certain illness and disease conditions, that to me says that must be something that's really on the rise, or something that's really prevalent in our world today if they're spending the money to advertise a drug for that condition. So again, look at things like rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, eczema, celiac disease, Crohn's disease, IBS. Again, you can see the list here, but you'll see, of course, lots of concern in our world today about these illnesses. And again, you probably know one or more people who have at least one, if not more, of these conditions that they suffer from, right? The bigger question is, what do all of these disease and illness conditions have in common? And the answer to that question is found here. Look at this. This is a quote right from the National Institute of Health. Over the past decade, considerable evidence from both animal and human studies has been accumulated to show a clear link between the imbalance of gut microbiome and chronic diseases, including inflammatory autoimmune disorders, gut inflammation-related disorders, and cardiometabolic diseases. Now, that screen that you just saw with those disease and illness conditions fall into those categories. So here's what's the most important thing, and that's why I underlined here, the gut microbiome. There's a clear link between the imbalance of that and these disease and illness conditions. So knowing that that's the case, the question is probably popping in your head, well, what's causing all of these? If this is becoming such a huge issue in our modern day world, what's causing all these imbalances to our gut microbiome? Well, I can tell you, unhealthy diet definitely ranks at the top of that list. Think about the typical diet that most people eat these days. It's not a raw fruit and vegetable diet. It's oftentimes a diet filled with a lot of either fast foods, junk foods, processed foods, canned, boxed, bottled foods, foods with all kinds of chemicals, preservatives, you name it, right? I mean, unfortunately, that is modern westernized diets today, and it's wreaking havoc on our bodies. Much alcohol consumption. I mean, not a lot of you on this particular webinar are falling into that category, but you probably know people who would definitely fall into that category. That's definitely upsetting our gut microbiome balance. Antibiotic use, unfortunately, this is a big one. A lot of people in our modern day world, every time they've got a cold, an illness of any kind, when they go to their doctor, they get a prescription for an antibiotic. And while maybe that's great at the time to address the issue, the challenge that we face is long-term antibiotic use, which has been very prevalent in modern day world for quite some time, really does a terrible disservice to our gut microbiome. It really upsets that balance and creates more problems, in my opinion, long-term than it creates good. Stress and anxiety. I mean, again, we just talked about the pandemic we came through. Stress and anxiety seemingly is at an all-time high, but that stress and anxiety is also very damaging to our gut. And then finally, lack of regular physical activity. And again, usually you're not in that category, but let's be honest, if we had people that were experiencing a lot more physical activity, we'd probably have a lot less obesity, right? We'd probably have a lot less need for people to have, some of the physical rehabilitation that they have to go through at times if people were exercising a little more. So anyway, all of these do contribute to our gut imbalance and our gut issues. There is one of the biggest threats that we haven't talked about yet. It's one that, for most of us, it's invisible. And it's virtually, this is the sad part, it's virtually unavoidable today in modern times. That is something we call glyphosate. And glyphosate might not ring a bell with some of you who may be new to this word or this chemical. Some of you may have heard about it because maybe you heard a little bit about this new Xiome 365 product that's coming out. But glyphosate is a very dangerous chemical. Now, it's one that is used heavily in the farming industry. In fact, in the farming industry, you probably, if you've driven by a farm field, you've seen photos that look like this. This is a farmer spreading what would arguably be either pesticides or weed killer or vegetation controllers. Anyway, these are chemicals. These are chemicals that, quite honestly, were never designed to be part of the human body. On the inside of our body, these chemicals are not designed to inside the human microbiome. Unfortunately, these chemicals are part of the biggest problem that we're facing in modern food supply today. And that is because glyphosate, which, by the way, for some of you who maybe you're still not sure what glyphosate is, here's an example of glyphosate you've probably used around your own home, or you certainly know of, called Roundup. Now, Roundup is a glyphosate. And it's kind of interesting that we have kill and killer twice on the front of Roundup. So obviously, seeing that, it's great for maybe the intended purpose, in this case, to kill the weeds in your yard, but it's certainly not good for the inside of the human body. And if it's killing weeds, it begs the question: what could, or what might, something like this glyphosate being added to this farm there, what might that do to our body? Well, sadly, we're starting to find out. We're starting to find out that glyphosate, while it's unfortunately very prevalent in modern day society, it's almost unavoidable because it's being produced and applied to our farming industry in mass amounts. In fact, it is, by most recent studies, the most number one applied chemical to our farm fields. And it's not just here in the United States, it's across the globe. It's a chemical that we're learning is more of a long-term chemical, meaning when it gets in the ground, it doesn't just go away. It stays there for quite some time. Sadly, it's now not only in the ground, it's becoming prevalent in our water supply. In fact, here in the United States, if you were to go to the Midwestern areas where farm runoff gets into the Mississippi River is loaded with glyphosate. Okay? It gets into the groundwater supply. And sadly, now it's even been reported that the glyphosate is now getting airborne into the air that we're breathing. So this is unavoidable. Now, unless we're eating nothing but pure, organic, grown vegetables and fruits, and we don't go out to restaurants, because I promise you, when you go to a typical restaurant, you're probably not getting nothing but organic foods there. In fact, you'd be lucky to get anything organic in a restaurant, because let's be honest, restaurants are trying to keep their costs down just to survive these days. So, when we eat anything outside of that organic, natural, God-made realm, sadly, there's a very good chance we're getting glyphosate or maybe other very similarly damaging chemicals into our body. And that is creating havoc in the gut.
Okay, well, being that I've already, aired and featured the actual information on glyphosate, if you want to, get the next 8 minutes of this particular video, you can always click the link in the caption. But I'm gonna speed up right to where we want to be in regards to how can we actually begin to protect ourselves and to fortify ourselves from this glyphosate. So I'm just gonna move up to like about right here, and like I said, you can revisit the link if you want to get those last, these 8 to 9 minutes that I'm saving you on this video. If you want to get that, you can always click the link in the caption.
So we want to increase the abundance of that. It's like putting that layer, that shield inside our intestine so that these stay tight, so that nothing's getting through. So we want to make sure that we're doing that, and that's why we want a liquid high-quality prebiotic. So the answer here is, what if it was a simple product you consume daily that would go ahead and improve that gut microbiome, would help you block those damaging effects of glyphosate, destroys the microbiome over time, and creates problems like leaky gut. And by the way, it's not just glyphosate. That's kind of public enemy number one here in our food supply today. But sadly, there are many other chemicals that we consume in modern day food supply that are almost as damaging as glyphosate. And this is definitely public enemy number one because of the abundance and the amounts that are put into our environment every single year. Then imagine you could support that and build that Akkermansia level in your body. Again, it almost create like a shield of protection inside your gut. That's what we're talking about. And that's why, because again, we're so excited that Xiome 365 is now here in inventory officially. And again, this is a comprehensive daily gut health beverage. It not only tastes great, it's designed to make you feel great. And why a gut health beverage? That's a good question. And we were looking at options. We could have gone with like a capsule product. There's a way to do this in a capsule. But the problem with that is a lot of people, number one, probably take a lot of capsules. I know I do. So sometimes we accept people don't want to take any more capsules. But there's something also that's beneficial when we put it in if you have somebody, and sadly this is a large percentage of our population today, who has gut dysfunction, they don't process foods, nutrients, supplements nearly as well as somebody that's got good gut function. So we thought if somebody's already got a gut dysfunction, let's give them the easiest way possible to get the nutrients from a product like this, and that's why a beverage made the most sense. Now, the other reason it made sense is this is a category that's on track to become one of the fastest growing segments of what we call this functional beverage industry. Now, you guys are familiar with the functional beverage industry because everywhere you go, there's all these different beverages that have new health benefits attached to them, right? I mean, you've seen advertisements for all kinds of beverages, right? Whether it's enhanced waters or it's, specialty beverages that claim to have certain, benefits to your health beyond just the fact that they're great to drink, right? So this is a huge, huge growing segment of the industry. In fact, your X2O water would absolutely be part of that functional beverage industry. That's what you create when you add your X2O sachets to your water, that you're creating a functional health benefit. But many of the gut health beverages today, though, in the market don't taste very good. And that's the other reason we went this path. Because, I'm a health guy like most of you watching, and when kombucha first came out, I'm like, oh, well, that sounds like it's going to be really good for my health, and especially for my gut. I'm going to go try some kombucha. And I remember the first time I put that stuff to my lips, I was like, wow, I've drank a lot of bad stuff in my life to make myself feel good. This is going to be a tough one to get used to. I don't know if I could do this on a daily basis. It's not that good. And I thought to myself, man, that's just how many people are going to just say, well, I know it tastes bad, I'll just drink it because I know it's good for me. There's a small percent. I'm part of that population. If you're watching me, you're probably part of that population. But as you know, there's a lot of people you know personally that they would take one sip of that stuff and go, ugh, I'm never touching that again. Don't ask me to drink that again, right? So here's the problem we have. If that's what is out there, or one of the most popular beverages out there to help support gut health, but you can barely stomach it, that doesn't help the world get healthier. The other thing, didn't want to go with something that had dairy in it or added sugar. So let's go back to that kombucha for a second. If we go and look at a kombucha, I challenge you to do this next time you're at the grocery store, your local convenience store, go look at a kombucha. Turn the label around, look on the back, and just look for one line on the back there, added sugars. And you're going to see a lot of added sugars. Why? Because they don't taste very good. And the only way they can get most people to drink them is they have to add sugar to it to make it taste relatively okay. All right? And here's the problem. As a society, we already have too much sugar in our diets. The last thing we need is more added sugar. We don't need that. So it's sad that here's a gut health beverage, say like a kombucha, that's designed to help with gut health, but yet the manufacturer's adding sugar to it just so it will taste decent enough for you to hopefully drink it on a regular basis. But it's almost counterintuitive. The same thing goes with dairy. As an example, kefir has become a very popular gut health beverage, or sometimes people, will start to eat more yogurts. But what if you have dairy intolerance? And there's a lot of people that have dairy intolerance today. So what's the lesser of two evils, right? So I put up with the dairy intolerance, the gut disruption that dairy gives me, so that I can get some of those, probiotics and happy gut stuff into my body. But again, that doesn't appeal to the mass population. So our goal was to make it simple, was to make it easy, and to make it mass appeal. So that here you've got a product that is a powder. It's not a liquid, so it's easy to travel with. Take it anywhere you want. It's very light. You take a trip, you go out for the day, you can have it in your pocket, right? Or in this case, you can have a jar. It's tiny enough to carry with you anywhere you go. And you just put a scoop of powder or tear open a package, right, and put it in there, and off you go, and you're done. Just add some cold water, and you've got a beverage. And by the way, it tastes great, because when it tastes great, people use it. Now, here's the proof of the pudding on that. So all of the folks at our home office, they've been fortunate, and that's because they work at Zuma's corporate global headquarters. They were one of the very first people to get the Xiome 365 into their hands when the shipment came in. So they've had it for a couple days. And so it's interesting to me, and I never asked anybody for feedback on it. Everybody at the home office got their jars and they took them home. And yet today, I come in the office and 3 different team members within our corporate office came up to me individually, unbeknownst to each other, and asked me this question. They said, can I use this product more than once a day? I said, well, that's an interesting question. Why would you ask me that? And I've had 3 people today in Zuma's home office ask me this. And the reason they asked me this is because they found is something we all want. Probably for most of us, we need it more than we might know at this moment. But if you have to drink something that doesn't taste very good or doesn't agree with you very easily, then you're probably not going to do it on a regular basis. And that's a shame, because then you don't get the end result here. The end result is getting you to a place where your gut is in awesome condition, where you're kind of like bulletproof in that area. And these disruptors in our world, in our environment today, in our food supply, don't become the trigger that leads to a downfall in your health. That's why this was so important, that it tasted good. So, for those of you who haven't had the chance to taste it yet, if you don't have it yet, I think you're going to love it. Now, let me put a little asterisk on that, little disclaimer here. No matter how hard we try, no matter how long we spend trying to get this to taste awesome, I promise you, you'll introduce this to somebody, maybe somebody in your immediate family, and they're going to taste it and go, I don't like it. And that's okay. Taste is subjective. All of us have things that we know that we don't like that 100 other people we know do like, right? That's just the world we live in. It's okay. But I'm promising you, 9 or 9.5 out of every 10 of the people who try Xiome 365, you're going to like it. And if they don't love it the first time they try it, if they were willing to do it for 2 or 3 or 4 days, they're probably going to love it over that short period of time. That's how good this product is. So I think those of you who have been fortunate enough to get a sneak opportunity early on to taste this when we were in the formulation stage would agree with that. But this Xiome 365 told me one thing I want to point out here before I take off my presentation off the screen here is this. A couple quick things. Notice the items that are highlighted in yellow here. The reason I highlighted those is those are trademark branded ingredients in this formula. The reason that's important to you is twofold. Number one is when you see a trademark branded ingredient, and you'll see lots of them in Xiume's products, that should say to you automatically, wow, this is a much higher level quality product than what I would typically find on the store shelf, on the Amazon shopping page. Because unfortunately, these are expensive to use. These are very expensive. Why? Because they have incredible amounts of human and animal clinical data and trials on this stuff. It says to you as the consumer who's going to put this in your body, this isn't just any old fruit powder here, this Baobab. This is a trademark branded version. This is a version that has very specific standards that must be met. A version that's actually had clinical research done on it to be able to show conclusively that it does certain things in a beneficial way within the body. And we didn't just do one, we did 3 of them. Here's why this is important for you to note. It's very hard to find anything in the marketplace today that contains 1, let alone 3 trademark brand ingredients like this. Why? Again, because it's expensive. Most of the stuff you're going to buy in the general retail marketplace, they're trying to compete with their competitors on price, and this becomes too expensive for them as a formulation step, and they just avoid it. Okay? Here's the other thing you're not going to find a lot of. This is why you heard Bodhi and Daryl saying earlier that we have not seen yet another product in the marketplace like this. Look at how many times the word organic appears on this label. Now, I'll count it up for you. It's 25 times. But there's 25 organic ingredients in this formula. And again, there's 2 awesome reasons for that. Number one is this is a gut health beverage. We just got done talking about in this presentation tonight how if you were going to try to treat your gut in the best way possible through your diet, you would choose organic foods whenever possible, because the non-organic stuff is probably loaded with a lot of those chemicals we talked about, especially and most probably including that glyphosate. So we know we want something that's organic for that reason alone. But here's the other thing. Gut health should be about organic products, right? Because if we're really going to do something in the form of a supplement like this to treat our gut, to reinforce it, to strengthen it, to help it restore, what a shame it would be if we didn't use organic. Because then we're kind of rolling the dice, aren't we? We're taking a chance. What if I just put regular raspberry in there, or regular carrot, or plain old blackberry, right, that was grown not using organic farming practices? Could it maybe have glyphosate in it? Could it maybe have other chemicals and pesticides or whatever else in it? Probably a good chance it would. And how challenging would that be for a formula, again, where we're trying to use it to restore gut health? But again, this is unfortunately very expensive to do. Now, I keep saying expensive, and for those of you who don't already know, don't freak out. When I say expensive, it doesn't mean that the product's going to be expensive. Because part of Xiume's mission always is not to produce great products that really do make a difference, do it in a way where it's affordable for the masses. Okay? So the good news for all of you watching, if you're not in the know on this already, when you buy that jar of Xiome 365, you get 20 servings in a jar, it's $2.50 a serving. So from that perspective, based on what I just told you, it's probably the best value gut health product on the market today. Now, obviously, a little biased, because I am part of the formulation team that put this into Xiume's line. I'm not the only one. We consulted with a lot of smart people over a very long period of time for this product to finally come out. Now that it's here, guys, it is a game changer for gut health, in my opinion. Now, again, I'm going to let you be the judge of that. If you've got this product on order and you start using it yourself, it's definitely going to give you an opportunity to experience it firsthand. Now, let's talk about that here. I'm going to come back on full screen.
Okay. If you want to get the last, say, if you want to listen to the rest of that, of the video, which I would encourage you to, but for time's sakes, with this particular recording, I'm going to stop it right there to move your attention to my website, right? My Xiome Worldwide website. This is my member site because I want you to get another look, a look at it, of the Xiome 365 that you just got through being introduced to, if for the first time. So you would simply click the link within inside of the caption, right? Or the video details, and you would click products, and you would come here and you would click Xiome 365 right here. And this is how I got to this page, because I wanted you to see to actually see the jar, right? And this is a 20 servings jar that was just detailed, and you can actually get a more up close and personal look at it. And as you can see, this is the Akkermansia that you learned about, and it just goes into detail on our website, in a consolidated, style and fashion of everything that you've pretty much just already been educated about. But I wanted to show you how to get to it. I'm sure this looks familiar. This is what Kim Marsh was just talking about on the webinar recording, and how to order it. So you would just come to the site, click products, right? Go to Xiome 365, and you would click right here. Click here to order your package. And this is if you want to get it at membership prices, or at the membership price rather. And you would get the 2 bottles, right? And you would get 60 sachets, which is 2 packs, right? And you would get 2 jars of it. So that's 40 servings at discount prices. And you also get the mixer cup with the mixer ball in it to, help to shake it up, mix it up really good. And this is a total approach. You have the probiotic to go with the prebiotic, and I do mine's in the morning, and I do this at night. And if you want to, you can throw in the digestive enzymes, but I'll leave that up to you if you want to, maximize your digestion. And for those of you who may very well say, hey, you know what? I don't want to do the entire package. I just would like to try it out, by itself, which we highly recommend that you do so with the X2O, but I want to give you the option. So you would just click shop, right? Either shop or order now. And you would just come to this blue box right here. And these are hyperlinks. And you would just click this retail link right here. And then you would click this. And it will bring you to the products on a retail product for product, purchase. And as you can see, the Xiome 365 is right here. But you're going to save so much more if you order it, if you shop as a member. And these are the 7 pouches. This is like every pouch is a serving. And if you want to try it out, just give it a trial run. You can add these 7 packs of it. Give you like a week supply, like a trial run. You can actually add this. So I'm not gonna hold you any longer. I just wanted to show you the problem, which is the glyphosate, right? And I wanted to give you the education and to show you through demonstration virtually, what you can do to approach it in the most effective way. And I know a lot of times you might not be able to get to webinars, right? You may, you may be pressed for time. So I wanted to bring the information to you on multiple social media sites, wherein you can access this information, share it, and revisit it, share with other people on your page to educate others. So, I'm going to end this here. Take care of yourselves. My name, once again, is Tamar Brown. And if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to, drop them in the comments. And my name, number right here, if you need to contact me on the phone or if you need to email me, my contact information is, in fact, at the top of my website. So with that, take care of yourselves. Let's keep changing the health of a generation.